June 25th, 2025. 16 citizens dead, hundreds wounded, unarmed, unheard, unprotected. While the government celebrated progress, the streets of Nairobi turned red again. This wasn't a protest. This was a blackout. A regime pulling the plug on memory, and the youth refusing to forget. A year ago, they marched for hope, for dignity, for fairness, for a future that didn't feel like a punishment. They were students, teachers, hawkers. They marched with songs in their throats and the Constitution in their pockets. And though the world barely noticed, they believed change would come, but it didn't, because that day, hope was answered with horror. This year, they marched again, but not for bills or budgets, not for policy, not even for themselves. This time, they marched for the dead, for brothers who didn't make it home, for sisters buried without justice, for names scrubbed from headlines, and futures erased by state-issued bullets. They came with crosses, handwritten, carved, some made from the same wood used to cook their meals. They came with paper flags. They came not to protest, but to remember. And just like last year, they were met at the barricades, not with apologies, not with change, but with riot shields, rubber bullets, tear gas, silence. The government didn't show up to speak. It showed up to suppress, to erase the memory of June 25th, to bury the past under more boots, more batons, more blackouts. But the people didn't run. They stood taller, because this time, they were marching with ghosts beside them. On this exact day last year, thousands gathered under the open Nairobi sky. They weren't criminals. They were citizens. Marching for one thing: justice. The finance bill was the breaking point, a cruel sentence disguised as policy. It taxed pain. It taxed breath. It taxed survival. And so the youth took to the streets, not with weapons, but with placards, not with violence, but with voices, not with chaos, but with clarity. It was supposed to be a march, a peaceful show of resistance, a declaration that the people were still watching, still awake. But what began with hope ended in horror. Without warning, police opened fire, rubber bullets, live rounds, tear gas, laughter from behind riot shields. Orders barked through radios, but Kenya's youth did not forget. They carried the pain like an anthem, etched into memory, burned into banners, whispered in prayers. This year they return, not with stones, not with vengeance, but with truth. They return not to destroy, but to remind the nation of what it tried to bury. They marched for justice, for memory, for names the government refused to speak, for names that never made it back to their front doors. One of those names was Albert Oiwang. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't a radical. He was a teacher, a blogger, a father of two. He used words, not weapons. He asked questions the state didn't want to answer. And so they took him. He was arrested, dragged into custody, beaten in silence, and left to die in a cell where no camera worked, and no truth was supposed to escape. By the time his body came out, his voice was gone, but his story had already taken root, because Albert became more than a man. He became a symbol of how fragile life is under power that fears accountability, and how dangerous it is, in Kenya, to care too loudly. His death was the match that lit a nation already drowning in gas fumes and broken promises. They didn't come with weapons. They came with articles of law. They came with song. They linked arms. They marched in silence. This is not chaos. This is clarity. This is the sound of a nation rising from betrayal, from broken trust, from state-sanctioned silence. This is the moment Kenya said, "We will not be erased." This is not just Kenya. This is not just a protest. It is a signal. Africa is waking up. A generation is rising, not with guns but with questions, not with riots but with reasons. They are refusing to bow, refusing to swallow another lie dressed in policy, refusing to inherit silence as tradition, from east to west, north to south. Africa's youth are speaking, and this time, they are not asking, they are not begging. They are not begging for handouts. They are demanding truth. They are not pleading for miracles. They are insisting on honesty, integrity, a government that remembers it works for the people, not above them. They are not fighting for flags, not for parties, not for empty manifestos printed every 4 years. They are fighting for something far more dangerous, futures, real ones, where children don't bury parents killed in protest, where speaking up isn't a death sentence, where justice doesn't arrive in body bags and sound bites. Because they know if they don't fight now, there may be nothing left to fight for. Now, the people are asking, not for speeches, not for compensation, not for another press release wrapped in regret. They're asking what no leader has answered. Will William Ruto face the families of the dead? Will the officers who pulled those triggers ever be named in court? Not transferred, not suspended pending review. Will justice arrive, or just more blackouts? And this generation? They're not forgetting. And if you believe in Africa's growth, its courage, its voice, its right to remember, share this video, subscribe to the channel, and help us make sure these stories are never erased. Because silence is not neutrality, it's permission. And right now, the youth of Kenya, of Africa, aren't just doing this movement for headlines. They're demanding for a change. Join the voice that refuses to be silenced, not with noise, but with truth. Because Africa's truth will not be buried. They're done being quiet.